Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we're going to be talking about what's coming with my channel over the, not next year, but over the next several weeks. And what I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be doing things so you guys get a clear understanding of why I'm doing it and what's coming with it. So, first off, next few weeks I will be busy with PTS testing. Because of the race changes and other things that might be on PTS that we don't know about yet. So Monday I will be covering the patch notes, and that will kind of determine how the next few weeks will come. By the third week of PTS I will start releasing builds, and those builds will be different than what I usually do, because I'm going to start with the focus on what I call basic builds, and they're pretty much beginner builds. So builds to help people get started in the game and help them give them a direction and where they can go, and helping them get started in PvE or PvP, whatever they choose to play. And so I'm going to be focusing on that in the beginning. Then later on I'm going to focus on what I consider more advanced builds. And these are going to be builds that are geared towards people get like wanting to move from beginner builds, which are helping you get started in the game, getting started into dungeons, that kind of thing, to more advanced builds that are helping you get from dungeons into trials. And then I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, if I'm going to call it master builds or in-game builds or what, but more high-end builds for players who are looking for that high, like for builds that are going to be trial playable, that kind of stuff. There will be meta builds mixed in there, and I'm going to have these broken into 3 categories. So I'm going to have the beginner builds or basic builds, the advanced builds, and then the expert, master, whatever you want to call them, builds, so that way they're laid out. Now the beginner builds, I'm going to build those without CP, so you can see what they're basically going to be like, and you can adjust the CP to your liking. Then when it comes to the advanced builds, I'll have a CP placement, but I'll also do a video showing you like how you can set the CP up yourself in your own way. And then in the third one, in the advanced ones, I'm going to have a video explaining CP changes you might make based on the different environments that you play in, based on pretty much the different trials. So I'm going to do 3 different videos on CP, but they're going to be put into those categories of beginner, advanced, and in-game or master builds, whatever you want to call it, kind of thing. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on for this first release, if you will. Now when it comes to the builds I release during this time, I'll probably release a couple builds for each, like 4 or 5 builds for each type. And then in the next update, when Elsewhere comes out, I'll release 4 or 5 different builds. And then in the next build for each one. And then I'll just keep adding to it, but I won't have to really adjust anything because they'll already be preset. Because right now we don't have a CP increase, and until we know what happens with the champion point system and what they're going to do with it, I can pretty much just keep everything in order this way a lot easier. So I'm going to be doing that until we hear about the CP changes. Once we hear about CP changes, then I'll make adjustments to the builds based on that, or I'll make a video that shows the adjustments to how you can do it, kind of like I did with the CP. I'm going to do with the CP builds, or the CP videos. And so this way I can release the builds, and then I can just show people how they can adjust based on what they want to play, kind of thing. I'm also going to be doing some videos or guide videos on how to create your own custom builds and how I come up with ideas for creating my own builds, so you guys can take that formula and build your own stuff, utilizing the gear sets you want or utilizing the build structure you want to give you the greater benefit. And I'm going to show you how you can do this for PvE, PvP, CP, no CP, Battlegrounds, you know, and Cyrodiil kind of play, all that kind of stuff. Oops. Yes, I've been living on the web too lately. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on for the first release of this year. So with Wraithstone, that's the stuff I'm going to be focusing on. When Elsewhere comes out, depending on what kind of changes occur to the game, I might go in and, like I said, iterate some of the builds that I did, like remake them and then re-release them. But I'm pretty much going to leave the builds as is as I go on. So the build lists that I create, or the build categories I create, are going to just continue to grow. That means more and more builds are going to be added to it. And this way I can focus on that, but I can also focus on other things. And that's where the next part of my channel stuff is coming in. Is there's some new games coming out this year that I do want to kind of do some videos on, because I want to give my reflective thoughts on it, and I think it would be good for my channel to have some new games added to it besides Elder Scrolls. So I'm going to let you know now, Anthem and Division 2 are games I'm going to cover. And hopefully by the time Division 2 comes out, I'll be able to get a new video card. And then later in the year, I plan on getting a new motherboard and processor as well, so I can just upgrade my system. And maybe some new RAM. And then later, again, just keep kind of building up my system so I can do better quality videos, better quality recordings, that kind of stuff. But it really comes down to how things pan out for the rest of the year. So, but yeah, that's pretty much the layout that I have going on right now. So I just kind of wanted to cover that stuff with you guys. And anytime that there's patch notes, you got to remember, reserve every Monday for pretty much patch notes right now. And any news that comes out, I will cover those as well, along with releasing my build videos and things like that. So you might get some days where I might do 2 videos in one day, or even 3, depending on what gets released. But always get, I will always do a video on a daily basis, if I can. But yeah, that's pretty much what I got going on. Other than that, you know, I'm just excited for this year. I mean, we got a whole year of content coming to us that's based on one continual story. And by the first release, it looks really cool. Like this Wraithstone, the idea how the two dungeons are connected with the Wraithstone, and how we're playing through them to get the Wraithstones. Then we're going to combine them to do the thing with Abner Tharn to release the dragon. Just sounds really cool. So, yeah, I'm just super excited for this year. And to those who have asked me how I really feel about the race changes, I can't really say until I get to test them. Math-wise, the idea of what they're showing is really well. Like, it seems like the races are really well balanced against each other when it comes to, like, the Magicka versus Stamina races. But then the Magicka races also play good as Stamina. They don't fall too far behind the Stamina ones. Minus the fact that they don't get, like, the weapon damage bonuses. They don't get certain perks that the other races do. But they get certain things that help them. Like, I was looking at Redguard for a Magicka DPS, and I was looking at it and I was like, I wonder if the weapon abilities apply to the Destruction Staff as well, and the Resto Staff. Because if they do, that's going to make them really good with those things, especially the ultimates. Having an 8% reduced ultimate cost would make them good Magicka DPS, because they're going to have a greater way of getting the ultimates out, which will boost their damage. But also the fact that they get 900 and something stamina whenever they get they do a direct damage, so they can dodge roll and then heavy attack, bam, and get their resources back. Or they can light attack and get their resources, their stamina back. So they can kind of, they got a lot of counterplay with how they work. And then I was looking at the same thing with High Elf and their stamina regen thing. Like, they got a stamina regen thing from any class abilities they use. So if they're using any class abilities and they're built for stamina, they've got some pretty good stam sustain built into them now. And then when you look at, like, even the Wood Elf doesn't, like, doesn't really garner anything for Magicka, really, but they can still play Magicka, and they would be pretty good at it. They just wouldn't be like the races that are made for it. So I see where a lot of people right now are mad with the race changes, but I also see what the developers are trying to do. They're trying to balance everything out really well, but by still giving us the race, like there's still going to be those races that are going to be good. Like the Altmer damage wise is going to be top dog, but sustain wise, the Breton beats him. So sustain wise, the Breton beats him out, but they still can do a decent amount of DPS. Versus the Altmer, who doesn't have as good a sustain, but has good damage. I don't know if that makes sense, but they have really high damage, and a high stat, but they don't have as good sustain. Where Breton has good sustain, but not as high damage. So they're kind of like a trade-off there. And then when you look at the Dark Elf, they can play either side. They can play Magicka or Stamina, and apparently, from what the math has said, and a lot of people have figured, Dark Elf will be the best at, like, raw damage, but not sustain. Where Redguard will still be the top dog for sustain, but also they won't have that extra damage that the Dark Elf does. So the Dark Elf still is better than them damage-wise, but sustain-wise, the Redguard's better. So there's like you said, each race and class has its, or each race, depending on what class they're playing too, will play heavily into that. Like if you take a Nightblade, Wood Elf Nightblade, they're going to be really good at Nightblade. But they're also going to be really good at a lot of the stamina classes, builds, especially things like Sork, Templar, stuff like that. But Dark Elf, now Dark Elf is going to be really good as a Templar because of the 6% weapon damage they get, but also the Repentance. So then now they have a way to sustain and keep their damage going. So it's kind of like the balance of each class against the races. Like each race has its place in each class now, and you can kind of see it when you look really in depth at the numbers and how they work. Like Dark Elf as a Nightblade, Magic or Stamina, amazing. But Wood Elf as a Stamina Nightblade is better. Like sustain wise. Damage wise, don't know. Because you have to look at sustain and damage in kind of the same sense. If you have really good sustain, your damage is going to be consistent. If you have really good damage, but not as good sustain, you gotta change how you sustain, so your damage is actually going to drop down to where that other race is going to get caught up to you. So like when it comes to the Dark Elf and Redguard, they're probably going to be pretty equal in damage because of the sustain the Redguard has and the weapon damage and high stamina the Dark Elf has. But then you add the Wood Elf in there and they have really good sustain, almost as good as the Redguard, and that's going to put them almost on par with him. Then you have the Khajiit, and the Khajiit's going to be up there too because of the different passives. So looking at this stuff, looking at each class, looking at the races and how you can build into them based on the different racial passives, and then looking at how you can build the different stuff. Like Nords are going to be amazing this update, like really amazing, not just for tanking but also for DPS and like PvP. They're going to be really good. They're going to be really strong in PvP. They're going to be really strong in PvE. And the fact that they can wear light armor and be tanky makes them really good at being like casters, because now they gain a greater resistance in both physical and spell, and in light armor they get that increased spell resistance. So they get greater survivability. They might not get the sustain and everything, but they get really good survivability. And that could be something somebody's looking for when it comes to a Magicka DPS. So it's kind of like you have to look at each race and how to benefit you as a player. So lots of good stuff in this, in the race stuff when you compare it to classes. So I know a lot of people are upset with the race law changes, but I'm really not. I'm kind of excited for it. The only one that really has been kind of offset really is the orc. After looking at it and really getting in and doing the math, the 500 health and 500 stam is kind of a little low. I think 750 health with like 1000 stam would be perfect for the orc. I think that would put them in a good place to where they could still tank, still DPS, and they're not as powerful as the dark elf when it comes to damage, but they have that sustainability, that little bit of sustainability that kind of plays into them really well. So I think that kind of a difference would play well with the orc. But all the other races I think are really well done. I even like the Argonian stuff. Like when I did the math, Argonians are going to be really good healers. Bretons will be better, but Argonians will be second best when it comes to actual healing. But when it comes to, like, if you want to have a well-rounded healer, a knight, an Argon, or an Altmer, or a high elf will be better. But if you want a good healer that has good sustain, good capabilities of healing, the Breton will definitely be the one you want to go with because of how well it can self-sustain. Then when you look at the Argonian, they have that increased healing done, plus they have that 1000 magicka. And then they have 1000 health. So they have good survivability with good healing and that good magicka pool. So they can be really good healers, but they can also be decent tanks. And then on top of that, not only can they be decent tanks, but they also make good stamina DPS or good magicka DPS. Because they have such this wide berth of playstyle. So I can see the classes, like I said, how they or the races, how they fit into each class. So that's going to be something that's going to really determine my build structure too. But I'm not going to be making builds like, oh, this one you have to be this or you have to be this. It's going to be like, I'm going to pick this race because it's going to work best for this build, but you could use any race. So, but yeah, that's pretty much what I got going on. I just kind of want to cover that and let you guys know. So you guys aren't like going, what the heck's going on? Why isn't he, like, when is he going to start releasing builds? So 2 weeks after PTS launches, they'll do like this next week, and then the following week, and then on the 3rd week of PTS is actually when I'll start releasing builds. That way we can get they usually do by the end of the 2nd week, going into the 3rd week, they'll do a big patch to the stuff, and it'll be a bigger patch than all the other patches they do, and that's the one where they'll do most of the fixes, like most of the adjustments. So that's why I want to wait until that one's done before I start releasing builds, because you still don't know, even after release, which is 2 to 3 weeks later, when release comes, what could happen. So I want to be prepared for all that stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much what's going on, and you guys know what's coming next. So if you guys like the video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.